This episode of The Extraordinary Keys for Life with Julia Anais is brought to you by Synergy for the Soul, working together to help you shift paradigms, envision a better life, empower your mind to live a better version of life through educating via workshops, retreats and events. For more information, head to our Facebook page, Synergy for the Soul. Hello there. On this episode of The Extraordinary Keys for Life, Julia Anais will talk about the spirit of you. We're at episode 6 already, halfway through this series, so let's pause a moment and see how far we've come. Julia will touch on some previous episodes and look to the keys you'll discover in future episodes.
Hi, welcome to the Extraordinary Keys for Life podcast. I'm Julia Anais, author of Extraordinarily Ordinary, Eyes Wide Open to Wonder. I read a quote recently which struck me. Remember that the future is not somewhere we are going. It is something we are creating. Every day we do things that make some futures more probable and others less likely. Today I'm sharing my personal reflections on the key importance of recognizing the spirit of you. The dictionary defines spirit as the non-physical part of a person which is the seat of emotions and character, the soul. This might be a good place to start giving some more insight to when I realised my spirit was seriously flagging. You might question why I felt so dispirited. In short, several years back, in my late 40s, I literally jumped from the frying pan into the fire when I opted to accept an offer back to a previous workplace. Might I say, this part of my story you won't find in the book, though I believe it definitely contributed to very nearly breaking my spirit. At the time I'd been working for a law firm for just 18 months, which I believed was going to be my dream career, one that would see me into retirement. Unfortunately, with a whole host of emotional buttons being pushed in my outside world, I didn't even see the beginning of the subtle bullying which was then weaving into my workplace. That situation very nearly broke my spirit, especially when I decided to speak up for the first time ever and report that I was suffering. The situation imploded, leaving my nerves shattered. Naturally, I jumped at an option to return to a former workplace where I'd felt safe and been a respected, long-standing employee. Pretty soon after starting, I realised I'd landed smack bang in the middle of another toxic situation, which had been brewing long before I arrived. Before long, my health began suffering and signalled a distress call when my heart threatened to give up the game. At that point, with my dreams quickly dissipating, you can imagine everything felt pretty soul-destroying. A quote read recently aptly reminds that clearly there was something more at work than I then realised. Anything in life that we don't accept will simply make trouble for us until we make peace with it. From Shakti Gawain. I ask you to imagine for just a moment. You're walking down the street after heavy rain. You find a puddle in your path. Do you walk around it? Walk through it? Or perhaps jump over it? Or maybe you jump right in, like my free-spirited 18-month granddaughter does, enthusiastically with both feet. I wonder, have you ever heard? The secret of genius is to carry the spirit of the child into old age, which means never losing your enthusiasm. This is one of my most favourite quotes, by Aldous Huxley, who was born in early 1890s and died before I was even born. He was an English writer and philosopher who wrote nearly 50 books, both novels and non-fiction. It's said he was concerned about the future of society and was personally longing for answers and meaning. He'd begun to form a spiritual belief where colour and light were central. I've often wondered why I lost touch with that spirit within. Did life knock it out as I grew into all the adult responsibilities? I recently met someone close in age to me who shared their story of knowing right out of school that they wanted to work some way in the creative arts field. That same person has gone on to indeed have some truly amazing experiences and build a career in the arenas of acting, TV and theme parks. It was a fascinating story, And while shy and quiet me never had any interest for that myself, this conversation did bring me to consider that perhaps at some earlier stage in life I'd missed an opportunity to discover creative pursuits of my own, even just as hobbies. I remember loving art in my late primary school years, and also recall having a real sense of achievement when I built a small wooden coffee table in tech studies, which still stands in one piece in my lounge room today. It's a favourite. However, when I left school, my career began in the office environment as a receptionist, and the most creative thing I got to do was, well, actually nothing stands out. So I guess this shows that my spirit was likely pretty uninspired at that point. Interestingly, during lockdown, while the world felt quieter, my creative spirit began to flourish, and suddenly I was writing with more passion and drive than I knew I possessed before. As you probably know, the Extraordinary Keys for Life podcast was born from my desire to offer more to help you after COVID-19 shut down all the available platforms when all went into lockdown. And also because I sensed early on this period of time would take a toll on the spirits of many. It's tough being disconnected from society, especially from loved ones and friends. While all our governing systems went into overdrive to save lives, sadly, it meant opportunities to live freely as we knew it were closed off too. Funny thing is, I barely knew what podcasting was when a long-time friend who'd worked in radio for more than 20 years decided to launch her own podcast production company and asked me if I'd consider creating a podcast using a section of my book for the content. My first question was, what's a podcast? And now here we are, happily rolling out episode number 6 in the first series. Goes to show we never know the opportune moments which could come along and steer our course in another direction. I guess you could say this was my second attempt at stretching my creative wings, with my first attempt being when I wrote my book. In hindsight, this has shown me that creativity comes in many forms, and that creating doesn't necessarily mean arts. Fact is, we are always creating in some way throughout life. A home, family, social scene, a career, etc. I sure have learned it's helpful to try and remember to stay flexible, as this truly does help one not stifle the spirit. And I firmly believe that the outcome of life will attest to what is invested in the spirited self. It's great that these podcast recordings are also permanently available for you to revisit. So, like rereading a book or watching a movie again, which I did just last night, there are always pieces of information not noticed the first time. In case you don't know, a key to learning is that the human mind learns by repetition. And I must let you know that eventually I found my way to a hypnosis certification, which sparked my inquiring mind in a much greater way. So we'll talk more on the topic of the mind in the next upcoming episode. I genuinely like you to know that each of my collaborations is created for your benefit, and my intention is always set in some way to assist you to enhance your life. You would have noticed I often mention my book, Extraordinarily Ordinary, Eyes Wide Open to Wonder, throughout this series. Reason being, this knowledge is where I began making sense of the course which I somehow seemed launched into when my life felt all amiss. As we know, life is ever relatable, and there's something in each of our stories which connects us intrinsically to each other. By the way, I've created a private Facebook group which you're welcome to join at any time. If you'd like to ask questions or be part of ongoing conversations, you can PM via Facebook to get the link. As I've mentioned before, writing was where I found my sanctuary, when all else felt hopeless. Irony was, it would lead to opening up a whole new world of creative skills that had been dormant forever. Every single person has that spark within waiting to be reignited when it feels to be subdued. What I realised then was that in making conscious choices to do better the way I was living, it actually lifted my spirits. Key words here: conscious choices. It felt like a process of many aha moments and a gradual realisation that these new choices were improving my life. This encouraged me to actually write the book to show that it's absolutely possible for any one of us to choose better for ourselves. As Deirdre mentioned in episode number 4, make wise choices. In hindsight, I must say, Every step of the way has been about choosing and then actioning. In saying this, I'd also like to remind that the keys are quite literally the topics of each episode, the key points which have helped me find the extraordinary in what felt to be an ordinary life. You might recall in the podcast intro, I asked, "What's your dream? What's your discipline?" As said in my book, I never dreamt of being anything much and certainly never imagined in my wildest dreams I would become a writer. But today I'm pursuing life with renewed purpose, direction and fresh confidence. In a magazine article I read a few years back, I was reminded by Paul Mercurio's words, "You have to pursue that dream and be prepared to work towards it." I suggest asking yourself, what is your dream? And then, what disciplines you need to work with to bring that to life. You might question what it is I'm referring to, particularly re spirit. Some may immediately think a bottle of liquor, or maybe a ghost, both considered true indeed. But in all my soulful exploration over the past 6 years, I've come to understand spirit is that thing which sparks us. I like to think of it as what drives us to feel the momentum, to react with enthusiasm and vibrance to life. Observe a child at play and you'll notice exactly what I mean. So, as life moves forward, and with the pandemic still at play, we're all having to learn to adjust to how our new world might look. As Kawina suggested in the last episode, number 5, the world could sure be a better place if we all cared more for the planet and each other. I've said myself that we need more care factor. I feel the best place to begin is with ourselves. And so, with Rumi's wise words in mind, yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself. I've realised that worrying about everything and everyone else did little good when I ended up such a stressed mess that I couldn't do anything to help myself, let alone anyone else. While it took courage to unpack my story and then publish it for all the world to see, perhaps this speaks of how desperately I needed to find something to refuel my purpose and bring deeper meaning back to life. Truth is, it was in the writing process where I was surprised to discover the many fragments of inner wisdom and energy stored deeply in the psyche that needed to be pieced together again to restore the spirit. So I've now learned you don't have to know every minute detail of what you're doing to start doing something new. Or as said by Zig Ziglar, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. Eventually each step really does lead to the next. I know you hear that all the time, right? But it's true. There was an American New Thought writer, teacher and leader, Ernest Holmes, born in the late 1800s, who died not too many years before I was born, whose spiritual philosophy is known as the science of mind. In recent years, I've found my way to some of his wisdom as follows. Spirit is the centre of everything. It is the centre of all personality. As a drop of water is in the ocean, so you are in an ocean of life. This life acts as life upon your thought. And I love that he further states, remember that the first steam-driven ship to cross the ocean carried in her cabin a book carefully explaining just why it was that a boat could not be driven by steam. A new energy is now being announced to the world, the creative power of thought, which draws its energy from a universal source. Your consciousness, which means the sum total of your thoughts, is the medium between the invisible cause and your personal life. I truly feel this speaks eloquently of the footing which history is standing on the brink of now, finally accepting more readily that the human spirit needs to be nurtured, valued, and recognised for its worth in the world which we consciously create. I've found without our sense of spirit in the driver's seat, life can literally feel stagnant. As well, I've realised being spirited is an integral part of putting our best foot forward in life. It is quite literally the voice of our authentic self. When we apply this important key, it allows us to effectively use this ability and show up for possibilities which support our dreams. Dreaming is not just for kids, though I'm often reminded by Kawina, we're all really just big kids grown up. And let's all be reminded that that kid, that is your spark. My granddaughter's carefree spirit certainly inspires me to remember how much lighter life can feel when we abandon the worry and allow ourselves to find more ease in life. I have the Science of Mind Wisdom card deck propped on my desk and often turn to them to draw insight. Ironically today, the card that came to light I really must share. There is no stagnation in spirit, nor should there be any in our idea of spirituality. To be spiritual is to create. The spirit is alive, conscious, aware, and active. I feel this sums up well another key that we can all take note of to tap into our personal spirited self. I'll leave you with that thought. Perhaps you'll embark on a journey to find your spirited one. You might just discover that's part of your ability to show up to things that will support you and your dreams. Thank you for listening in today. Music provided by my wonderful son Bradley Button, who you can follow on Instagram at Bradley W. Button. I'd love for you to join us for the rest of this series, and if you think someone else you know could benefit, please share this podcast with them. Coming up in episode 7, I'll be sharing with you on topic of mind power with Darren Stevens, certified TLT trainer and clinical hypnotherapist. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Julia Renace and at Synergy for the Soul. Subscribe to YouTube to follow further episodes in this podcast, also available on all your favourite platforms like Whooshkaa, Spotify and Apple. Website is currently in the works, and you can get my book online at amazon.com or barnesandnoble.com. Remember, never underestimate the vibe of life, and you are the pen to your own book. Don't forget to give us a review, and I look forward to joining you again soon in episode 7. Bye now.